All right, today's lesson is on cellular respiration. We're going to get an overview of it. All right, so cellular respiration essentially involves a series of controlled reactions, much like photosynthesis, and these reactions allow energy to be slowly released. So in this image that you see here, what form is the energy being released from the marshmallow in? What is the form that energy is being released? Well, if you're thinking to yourself or maybe saying out loud that the energy is being released in the form of light and heat, you would be right. You might not have thought of light. You probably thought of heat as an energy source, but it's also releasing light because think about fire gives off light. So it is being released in the form of light and heat. So here is the chemical summary or the chemical formula of cellular respiration in words. And we're going to talk about what this means. Okay, so we can also express this in symbols, but here we have oxygen. We have oxygen plus glucose gives us or equals or produces. So here are our reactants, right? Our reactants. Why is it always got to do that weird line? All right, we got our reactants, and then we have our equal sign. If you think about this like math, but we use the arrow when we're doing chemical formulas. And here we have our products of carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Products. Okay, so we got our reactants and we've got our products. Yay. So what would this look like if we expressed this in symbols? Does anybody know any part of this? We should be able to figure it out from the word version of this. So oxygen, you should know oxygen normally appears as a gas. So that means there are two oxygen molecules, or atoms, I should say, plus glucose, which is sugar. And if you recall from photosynthesis, sugar, the chemical formula for sugar, I'll always be doing that. Chemical formula for sugar is C6H12O6. And that gives us, there it goes again. That's a terrible arrow, but you get the idea. Then we get carbon dioxide, so that's CO2 plus, geez. We're going to just put it down here. Actually, I guess put it over here. H2O plus energy That's supposed to be a lightning bolt. I don't know if it looks like a lightning bolt. Probably not. But that's energy. Okay. That's nothing. All right. Let's clean this up a bit, because one thing that we'll notice is that these aren't actually balanced. If there's only 2 hydrogen over here, but there's 12 over here. So you see 2 hydrogen here, but there are 12 on this side. They're not balanced. So let's clean this up and look at what this formula looks like when it's balanced. Okay, so O2 still here, C6H12O6, still here. We've got the CO2 over here, the H2O, and the energy. Okay, but now we have 6 oxygens times the 2. So for each molecule of oxygen gas, there are 2 oxygen atoms. So 6 times 2 is 12. And over here we see we've got 6 times 2 is 12 oxygen. But there are also 6 oxygen here, and there are 6 oxygen here. Okay, so this is oxygen. If we look at carbon next, we've got 12, or sorry, I'm looking at hydrogen. 6 carbons, so there's 6 here. And then there's 6 times 6 times 1 is 6. So there's 6 on both sides. Okay, and then if we look at oxygen, the only other atom involved here, we've got, nope, we already did oxygen. What am I thinking? Carbon. Hydrogen is the next one we need. Sorry about that. All right, so hydrogen should balance out as well. Oh, by the way, I forgot to put the 6 here. So there's 12 and there's 6 oxygen. On this side, there's 12 and 6. Carbons, there's 6 and 6. And hydrogen, there are 12. And then over here, there's 2 hydrogen atoms for every molecule of water. So 6, and there's 6 molecules of water. So 6 times 2 is 12. So we got 12 here. 12, and we get 12 here. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay, so it balances out. So we have to have these 6s in here too. So 6 molecules of these various things, so that we're just really rearranging the atoms, the carbon, the oxygen, the carbon, and the hydrogen atoms. Okay. All right. So here we have an illustration of the stages that we go through when it comes to cellular respiration. There are 3 stages. And you can kind of see the sugar, right? Here's the sugar. And if you recall on the previous slide, we had 1 sugar molecule here, right? C6H12O6. So there are 6 carbons. Well, when we look at this illustration, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 6 carbons. Okay, so that sugar is going to go in to this stage, which is called glycolysis. See that here? Okay. All right. So glycolysis, lysis basically means to split or to separate. So glycolysis is going to separate this glucose into two molecules that have 3 carbons each. So it basically splits it in half. And those two molecules will go into the Krebs cycle. Okay? They'll go down through here and do this thing here. They'll go through a bunch of chemical reactions. The result of these chemical reactions produces some energy as well as some CO2. Okay, so that's the Krebs cycle. Energy and CO2. Glycolysis gives us energy. And two pyruvates, but we won't call them that. 3 carbon molecules. And these. Okay. All right, so that's glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. And then we have an electron transport. That sounds familiar. And it should be familiar because it's similar to the electron transport chain we learned about during photosynthesis. All right, so where are glucose and oxygen used during cellular respiration? Well, they are used sugar is used in glycolysis, and oxygen is used in the electron transport chain. Okay, or electron transport. All right, and where do we see water, carbon dioxide, and energy when we look at this diagram? Let's lean it off a little bit. Where do we see water, carbon dioxide, and energy? Well, we see energy in all 3 stages. We've got energy here, here, and here. Where do we see water? We see water as an output of the electron transport. And carbon dioxide comes from the Krebs cycle. Oh, it is not a very good circle. Okay, so we get energy out of all 3 stages, which is why the mitochondria, this is happening in the mitochondria, by the way, that's why the mitochondria is so good at producing energy, because it produces energy in all 3 stages of cellular respiration. It also produces water in the electron transport chain. It produces carbon dioxide in the Krebs cycle. So when you're exhaling the carbon dioxide from your lungs, some of that is because you breathed it in and you don't need it. You express it back out. But also, some of it is carried from this process of cellular respiration into your bloodstream and then to your lungs, where it's released from there as well. Okay. Now, some of that carbon dioxide will be reutilized in other places too, but we don't really need it, so we release it. So we get carbon dioxide released during the Krebs cycle, water being released during electron transport, and energy is released in all 3 stages. Okay, so boom, 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 boom. There they are. Right there. All right, let's take a closer look at glycolysis. This is the first part of cellular respiration. This is the portion here of the illustration that deals with glycolysis. So what happens to glucose during glycolysis or glycolysis? Well, the answer is that it gets broken down into two smaller molecules, as I mentioned before. It gets basically split in half in terms of the carbon distribution. So at the end of glycolysis, about 90% of the chemical energy that was available in the glucose is still unused. So it only used up about 10%. And it's locked in these chemical bonds of this molecule, these two molecules, called pyruvic acid. Okay, so those little buggers there. Ah, Nachenbegen. Oops, going too far. Pyruvic acid. Why is it not letting me do that? How we spell that is Pyruvic acid. Pyruvic acid. Okay, you can kind of tell that's what that says, sort of. So we do get a little more energy that's converted from this portion. And then those two pyruvic acids then move into the Krebs cycle. Let's go ahead and clean up our slide. All right, the Krebs cycle, of course, is the second part of cellular respiration. And basically, you get a little more energy converted during this stage, as well as that carbon dioxide. And then we get the electron transport. This is the final of the three stages of cellular respiration. And the electron transport generates the bulk of the energy that we get from cellular respiration. Again, most of it is produced during cellular respiration. So we've got some dashed arrows in this illustration, you may notice. What are those dashed arrows right here? What do they indicate? What is their purpose? What do you think those mean? Well, the dashed arrows indicate that reactants from both of the previous stages are required for the electron transport stage. So a lot of times students will have some difficulty kind of distinguishing between the concepts of cellular respiration and when we talk about respiration in terms of just breathing in and out, inhaling and exhaling. So if you read the first paragraph of the oxygen and energy section of the textbook, you will see that there are some connections between the processes, but there are also some significant differences. So just kind of make sure you pay attention to that, so you kind of know what's going on there. So here's a good question. Have you ever thought about the fact that the Earth doesn't ever run out of oxygen? Have you ever wondered why that might be? Well, if you have, maybe you came to the conclusion, or maybe you're going to learn about it right now. But cellular respiration is balanced by the other process that we've already learned about, and that is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. You see that right there. And then it releases photosynthesis, we're still talking about, it releases oxygen into the atmosphere, which is then used in cellular respiration to release energy from food. And that, my friends, is an overview of photosynthesis.